The crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead as Olivia stood in her pale blue designer dress, a champagne flute clutched tightly in her hand. The ballroom of the Grand Plaza Hotel was filled with the elite of the city, business owners, old money families, and rising stars in finance. This was supposed to be the happiest night of her life, her engagement party to Richard Whitmore, heir to Whitmore Industries and her boyfriend of 3 years. Her parents beamed from across the room, finally seeing their careful planning come to fruition. The merger between Bennett Enterprises and Whitmore Industries would create the largest real estate development company in the region. And all it had taken was their daughter falling in love with the right man. Only Olivia wasn't sure it was love anymore. Something had changed in Richard these past few months. Late nights at the office, canceled dates, and a growing coldness she couldn't explain away. "If I could have everyone's attention," Richard's voice rang out as he tapped his glass. The crowd quieted, all eyes turning to the handsome man in the tailored suit. Olivia moved toward him, a practiced smile on her face. This must be the toast they had planned. "I have an announcement to make," he continued, his eyes not meeting hers. "I know we're here to celebrate an engagement, but I'm afraid there's been a change of plans." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Olivia froze midway across the room, something cold settling in her stomach. "The truth is," Richard's voice was steady, unapologetic, "I've fallen in love with someone else." The champagne flute slipped from Olivia's fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The sound echoed in the sudden silence of the room. "Megan and I never meant for this to happen," Richard continued, reaching out to take the hand of a woman stepping forward from the crowd. Olivia's vision tunneled as she recognized her best friend since college, the maid of honor for her wedding, standing beside Richard with a guilty but determined expression. "We've tried to fight our feelings out of loyalty to Olivia, but we can't live a lie anymore," Megan said, her voice carrying across the stunned room. "We hope someday you'll understand and forgive us." The whispers started, growing louder as people turned to stare at Olivia. Her mother's face had gone white with shock. Her father was already pulling out his phone, no doubt calling the company lawyer. Olivia couldn't breathe. The walls of the ballroom seemed to be closing in. Without a word, she turned and walked out, back straight, eyes forward, ignoring the pitying looks and shocked expressions. She made it to the elevator before the tears came, hot and silent, streaming down her face as she pressed the button for the hotel lobby. Outside, the cool night air hit her tear-stained face. She waved away the valet who approached to get her car and instead started walking, high heels clicking on the pavement, no destination in mind except away. Away from the humiliation, away from the betrayal, away from the life that had just crumbled around her. Her phone buzzed repeatedly in her clutch bag, calls from her parents, probably, demanding she return and handle the situation with dignity, to think of the business implications. She switched it off and kept walking until her feet hurt too much to continue. Only then did she hail a taxi and give the driver her address. The next morning, Olivia woke to pounding on her apartment door. She opened it to find her mother, perfectly put together despite the crisis, a newspaper folded under her arm. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" her mother hissed, pushing past her into the apartment. "Your little disappearing act last night made everything worse. Now the story isn't just about Richard leaving you. It's about how you couldn't handle it like an adult." She thrust the newspaper at Olivia. There on the society page was a photo of her empty chair at the engagement party, with Richard and Megan in the background, looking apologetic but united. The headline read, "Whitmore Bennett merger collapses with broken engagement. Dad has been on the phone all morning trying to salvage the deal," her mother continued, pacing the living room. "The Whitmore board is getting nervous. We need to control the narrative. Richard has suggested a joint statement saying the breakup was mutual." "Mutual?" Olivia's voice cracked. "He announced he was leaving me for my best friend in front of 200 people. This isn't about your feelings, Olivia. It's about damage control. The merger—" "I don't care about the merger," Olivia cut in, surprising herself with the force of her words. "I just had my heart broken and my trust betrayed in the most public way possible. And all you care about is the business deal?" Her mother stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. "This is bigger than you. The Bennett name—" "Get out," Olivia said quietly. "Please, just go." After her mother left, Olivia spent the day in a daze, ignoring calls and messages. By evening, she had made a decision. She packed a suitcase with only necessities, No designer clothes, no expensive jewelry. She emptied her personal bank account, grateful she'd always kept some money separate from the joint accounts she'd set up with Richard. Over the next 2 days, she systematically dismantled the life she'd built. She returned Richard's gifts, donated her wedding dress to a charity shop, and canceled orders for the wedding. She ignored her parents' increasingly frantic calls and the gossip articles proliferating online. On the 3rd day, she left a note for her landlord, terminated her lease, and walked out of her apartment for the last time. At the bus station, she studied the departure board looking for a destination far from the city. Her eyes landed on Harbor Cove, 4:30 p.m. She remembered visiting the small coastal town years ago on a college trip, peaceful, quiet, and most importantly, a place where no one knew her name or her shame. The bus ride was long, giving Olivia time to think. For as long as she could remember, her life had been planned for her. The right schools, the right friends, the right career path in the family business, and finally, the right marriage. She'd never questioned it, had been proud to be a Bennett, to fulfill the expectations that came with the name, but now, watching the landscape change from city to suburbs to rolling countryside, she wondered who she might be without all those expectations. Who was Olivia, separate from the Bennett name and fortune? She didn't know, but for the first time, the uncertainty felt like freedom rather than fear. Harbor Cove appeared on the horizon as the sun was setting. The small town nestled against the shoreline, fishing boats bobbing in the harbor, their lights twinkling in the gathering dusk. As the bus pulled into the small station, Olivia took a deep breath. No one here would care about Whitmore Industries or Bennett Enterprises. No one would recognize her from the society pages or whisper about her humiliation. She stepped off the bus, suitcase in hand, and felt something shift inside her, a tiny spark of possibility. Maybe here in this place where the only expectations were her own, she could finally discover who she truly was and what she really wanted from life. The small hotel near the harbor had a vacancy, a simple room with a view of the water. Olivia paid for a week up front, using cash rather than the credit cards that could be traced. That night she sat by the window watching the moonlight on the water and made herself a promise. She would not cry over Richard or Megan again. Their betrayal had freed her from a life she hadn't known she was trapped in. Now she would build something new, something that was entirely her own. 2 weeks passed in Harbor Cove, and Olivia slowly settled into a rhythm far removed from her former life. She found a job at a small bookstore called Title Pages, owned by an older woman named Grace who asked few questions and seemed content with Olivia's vague explanation about needing a change. The pay was modest, but the work was peaceful, organizing books, helping customers find what they needed, and occasionally manning the small coffee counter in the corner. Her rented room at the Harborside Hotel had become too expensive for a long-term stay, so she'd moved to a cheaper boarding house run by a retired fisherman and his wife. Her new room was tiny but clean, with a small window overlooking a garden rather than the sea. At night, she'd sit on the narrow bed and listen to the distant sound of waves, wondering if she'd made the right choice in running away. The truth was, despite the simplicity of her new life, Olivia felt adrift. She checked her phone less and less, tired of seeing missed calls from her parents and former friends. The few times she did answer her mother's calls, the conversations ended in arguments, her mother insisting she return to the city, Olivia refusing, neither understanding the other's position. The only person from her old life who seemed to respect her decision was her grandmother, who sent a brief text. "Sometimes we need to get lost before we can be found. Take care of yourself, dear one." The message brought tears to Olivia's eyes. Her grandmother had always been different from the rest of the family, less concerned with appearances and status. One evening, after a long shift at the bookstore, Olivia found herself caught in an unexpected downpour. She ducked under the awning of a small cafe, clutching her jacket closed as the rain hammered down. The street quickly emptied as people ran for shelter, leaving her alone watching the storm, or almost alone. "Looks like you could use this," a deep voice said from behind her. Olivia turned to see a man holding out a large black umbrella. He was tall with broad shoulders, dressed simply in worn jeans and a faded blue work shirt. His face was kind, laugh lines around. His eyes a day's stubble on his jaw, and an expression that held no pity, just a simple offer of help. "Thank you," she said, hesitating. "But won't you get wet?" He shrugged. "I've got a waterproof jacket. Besides, I'm only heading down to the pier. You can take it if you're going further." "I'm staying at Pine Street boarding house," Olivia said. "That's on my way. We can share," he offered, opening the umbrella and holding it out so she could step under its shelter. They walked in silence for a moment, the rain drumming on the fabric above them. Olivia was acutely aware of the stranger beside her. Not in a frightening way, but in the way you notice someone who seems perfectly comfortable in their own skin. "I'm Ethan," he said finally. "Ethan Hayes." "Olivia," she replied, purposely leaving off her last name. "I'm fairly new in town." "I noticed," he said with a small smile. "Harbor Cove is small enough that new faces stand out. You're working at Title Pages, right? With Grace?" Olivia nodded, surprised he'd noticed her. "Just for a few weeks now." "Grace is good people," Ethan said. "Gave me credit at her store when I first moved here and was short on cash. Took me 6 months to pay her back and she never once mentioned it." "You're not from here originally either?" Olivia asked, curious despite herself. Ethan shook his head. "Moved here about 5 years ago. Needed a fresh start." Something in his tone suggested a story there, but he didn't elaborate. They turned onto Pine Street, the boarding house visible at the end of the block. "So what do you do here?" Olivia asked. "I restore old boats," Ethan said. "Work down at Hayes Boatyard. Nothing fancy, but it keeps me busy." "Hayes Boatyard? Is it yours?" Ethan laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "No relation, just a coincidence. Old man Wilson owns it. Been in his family for generations. I'm just lucky he took a chance on me." They reached the boarding house and Olivia stepped onto the covered porch. "Thank you for the umbrella escort," she said, suddenly reluctant to end the conversation. Ethan nodded, raindrops running down the shoulders of his jacket. "Any time." He hesitated, then added, "If you're interested in seeing what Harbor Cove is really about, a bunch of locals gather at the Anchor Pub on Friday nights. Live music, decent food. Might be a good way to meet some people." Olivia felt a flutter of anxiety at the thought of socializing, of having to explain herself to strangers. But there was something about Ethan's easy manner that made the idea less intimidating. "Maybe I will. Thanks for the tip." He gave a small wave and turned to go, hunching his shoulders slightly against the rain as he continued down the street. Friday came, and Olivia found herself standing outside the Anchor, listening to the sounds of laughter and music spilling from the open door. She almost turned away twice before gathering her courage and stepping inside. The pub was warm and crowded, string lights hanging from wooden beams, tables filled with locals enjoying the start of the weekend. A small band played in the corner. Nothing fancy, just a few people with guitars and a makeshift drum set, but the music was lively and good. Olivia scanned the room, not sure what she was looking for until her eyes landed on Ethan sitting at the bar. He spotted her at almost the same moment and raised a hand in greeting, a surprised but pleased expression on his face. She made her way over, suddenly self-conscious in her simple dress, one of the few non-designer items she'd brought with her from her old life. "You came," Ethan said, moving his jacket from the neighboring stool. "Can I buy you a drink?" "Just a soda, please," Olivia said, climbing onto the stool. "I'm still getting my bearings in this town." Ethan signaled the bartender and ordered for her. "So how's life at Title Pages?" he asked. "I'm enjoying it more than I expected," Olivia admitted. "Grace has been teaching me about different authors and genres. I never had much time for reading before." "Too busy with your real job?" Ethan asked, curious but not judgmental. Olivia tensed slightly, unsure how to answer. In her old life, she'd worked at Bennett Enterprises in a position created specifically for her, technically in marketing, but really just keeping her visible to clients and partners as the face of the next generation. It had never felt like a real job, more like an extended audition for her future role. "Something like that," she said finally. "My family had expectations." Ethan nodded, seeming to understand the weight behind her words. "Families can be complicated," he said, and again Olivia sensed a story there. Before she could ask, a group of people approached, greeting Ethan warmly. "Who's your friend?" asked a woman about Olivia's age with bright copper hair and a friendly smile. "This is Olivia," Ethan said. "She's new in town. Olivia, this is Lou. She runs the dive shop by the pier. Introductions continued around the group, a fisherman named Paul, a teacher called Alex, the town's only doctor named David, and a few others whose names and occupations blurred together. They pulled up more chairs, expanding their circle to include Olivia naturally, without the forced politeness she was used to from social gatherings in her previous life. The conversation flowed easily, jumping from local gossip to fishing conditions to plans for the town's upcoming summer festival. No one asked Olivia probing questions about her past or why she'd come to Harbor Cove. They seemed content to include her in the present moment, which felt like a gift. As the evening wore on, the band took a break, and Alex, who Olivia learned was not just a teacher but also a talented pianist, moved to the old upright piano in the corner and started playing. People began to dance in the small space in front of the band area, not formal dancing, just moving to the music, laughing and enjoying themselves. "Do you dance?" Ethan asked, finishing his beer. "Not really," Olivia said truthfully. Her dancing had been limited to formal events, stiff, proper movements learned in classes her mother had insisted on. "Good," Ethan said with a grin, standing and offering his hand. "Neither do I. We can be terrible together." Something about his easy confidence and lack of pretension made it impossible to refuse. Olivia took his hand and let him lead her to the makeshift dance floor. True to his word, Ethan wasn't a skilled dancer, but he moved with a natural rhythm that made up for his lack of formal technique. Olivia gradually relaxed, letting the music guide her movements, no longer concerned with getting the steps right or what anyone might think. For a few minutes, she wasn't Olivia Bennett, jilted almost bride and corporate disappointment. She was just a woman enjoying a simple moment of connection and joy. Later, as they walked back toward Pine Street under a clear night sky full of stars, Olivia felt more at peace than she had in weeks. "Thank you for tonight," she said as they reached the boarding house. "It was exactly what I needed." "The locals here are good people," Ethan said. "They've helped me through some rough patches. Thought they might do the same for you." The simple kindness of the gesture, introducing her to his friends, helping her feel less alone, touched Olivia deeply. In her former social circle, introductions always came with agendas, networking opportunities, potential advantages. Ethan had offered connection for its own sake. "I should tell you," he said, breaking into her thoughts. "My roommate moved out suddenly last week, took a job in the city. I'm looking for someone to share the rent at my place. It's nothing fancy, but it's a lot nicer than the boarding house, and the rent would be about the same as what you're paying now. There's a spare bedroom with its own bathroom." Olivia blinked, surprised by the offer. "You hardly know me." "I'm a decent judge of character," Ethan shrugged. "Besides, Grace vouches for you and she doesn't trust easily. Think about it, no pressure. The apartment's on Harbor Street above the old hardware store. Second floor, blue door. Come by tomorrow if you want to see it." With that, he gave a small wave and headed back toward town, leaving Olivia standing on the porch, considering a possibility she hadn't expected. The next day, after her shift at the bookstore, Olivia found herself walking to Harbor Street, curiosity winning out over caution. The hardware store was easy to find, and a narrow staircase at the side led to a small landing with a bright blue door. She knocked, heart beating a little faster, unsure if this was wise but drawn to the idea of a real home rather than a temporary room. Ethan opened the door, looking surprised but pleased to see her. "You came," he said, stepping back to let her in. "Welcome to my humble abode." The apartment was simple but charming, an open living area with large windows overlooking the harbor, a small but functional kitchen, and a hallway leading to what she assumed were the bedrooms. The furniture was mismatched but comfortable looking. Bookshelves lined one wall, and a few framed photographs of boats and seascapes hung on the others. "It's not much," Ethan said, suddenly looking a bit self-conscious, "but the view makes up for it." Olivia walked to the window, taking in the panorama of the harbor, boats bobbing on the gentle waves, seagulls wheeling overhead. In the distance, the open ocean stretched to the horizon. "It's beautiful," she said honestly. And it was, not in the manicured, perfect way of the homes she'd grown up in, but in a real, lived-in way that spoke of a life guided by genuine preferences rather than status or show. Ethan showed her the spare room, smaller than her boarding house accommodation but with a real bed, a desk under the window, and its own tiny bathroom with a shower. "The previous tenant took most of the furniture when they left, but we can find you what for you need," he said. Standing in that small empty room, Olivia felt a sense of possibility she hadn't expected. This could be a space of her own, a place to start building a new life, not just hiding from the old one. "So what do you think?" Ethan asked as they returned to the living room. "Could you see yourself living here, with a near stranger who restores old boats for a living?" There were 100 reasons to say no. It wasn't proper. It wasn't safe. It wasn't what someone from her background would do. But standing in the warm light of the apartment, looking out at the peaceful harbor, Olivia made her decision. "Yes," she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "I think I could." The weeks turned into months, and Olivia found herself settling into a life she never could have imagined before. The small apartment above the hardware store had become home, filled with secondhand furniture they'd found at local yard sales and thrift shops. Her room, once empty and impersonal, now reflected bits of her emerging personality. Shelves lined with books borrowed from the store. Grace let employees take home books to read as long as they kept them in good condition. A colorful quilt purchased from a local craftswoman, and a collection of sea glass and shells gathered during walks along the beach. Living with Ethan had proven surprisingly easy. He was neat without being fussy, respectful of her privacy while also being genuinely good company. Their routines gradually meshed. Ethan usually left early for the boatyard, while Olivia's shifts at the bookstore often began later. They'd cross paths in the kitchen, Ethan making coffee before heading out, Olivia preparing breakfast before her day began. In the evenings, they often shared meals, a skill Olivia had never needed to develop in her previous life of restaurants and personal chefs. Her first attempts at cooking had been disastrous: burned pasta, oversalted soups, and one memorable incident with a smoking oven that had set off the building's fire alarm. "You've really never cooked anything before?" Ethan had asked, trying not to laugh as they fanned smoke out of the windows. Olivia had shaken her head, embarrassed. There was always someone else to do it, she admitted. Instead of mocking her, Ethan had simply rolled up his sleeves. "Well, lucky for you, I make a mean spaghetti. Let me show you." That night had become the first of many informal cooking lessons. Ethan wasn't a gourmet chef by any means, but he knew how to prepare simple, hearty meals, skills he'd learned out of necessity when he first lived on his own. Olivia proved to be a quick study, eager to master this new independence, and soon she was contributing equally to their shared meals. They fell into a comfortable rhythm, taking turns cooking dinner, sharing the cleanup, and often ending the day watching old movies on Ethan's ancient laptop, or just talking on their small balcony, watching the lights of the harbor as the sky darkened. Olivia found herself opening up to Ethan in ways she never had with anyone before. Not with her status-conscious friends, not with Richard during their 3 years together, not even with her family. She told him about growing up with the weight of the Bennett name, about the constant pressure to be perfect, about how her engagement had seemed like the natural culmination of a life planned by others. She even told him about the public humiliation of being left for her best friend, though she kept the details of her family's business vague. Ethan listened without judgment, offering sympathy without pity, and sharing enough of his own past to make her feel less exposed. His parents' early deaths, his struggles through college on scholarships, his decision to abandon a promising corporate career when he realized it was making him miserable. "What made you choose boat restoration?" Olivia asked one evening as they sat on the balcony, sharing a bottle of inexpensive wine and watching the sunset paint the harbor in shades of gold and pink. Ethan was quiet for a moment, seeming to consider his answer carefully. "My grandfather had a small fishing boat when I was a kid," he said finally. "Some of my best memories are of helping him fix it up each spring. He taught me how to work with my hands, how to problem solve, how to take pride in creating something solid and real." He took a sip of wine before continuing. "After college, I took a job at a big shipping company. Thought I was on the right track, moving up in the world. But I was miserable. Spent my days in meetings talking about boats rather than actually working on them." "So you just quit?" Olivia asked, trying to imagine having that kind of courage. "Not right away," Ethan admitted. "I stuck it out for almost 2 years. Then one day I was sitting in yet another pointless meeting, watching PowerPoint slides about maximizing fleet efficiency, and I suddenly remembered how it felt to work alongside my grandfather. The smell of wood and varnish, the satisfaction of fixing something with my own hands. I handed in my resignation that afternoon. Weren't you scared? Olivia asked. Ethan laughed softly. Terrified. I had no real plan. Just some savings and a desire to work with boats again. I traveled up and down the coast for a while, picking up odd jobs at marinas and boatyards, learning from old-timers who'd been restoring wooden boats for decades. Ended up here when the position at Wilson's yard opened up. He glanced at her, his expression thoughtful. Best decision I ever made, even though it probably looks like a step down to most people. It doesn't look that way to me, Olivia said honestly. You seem content. That's rare. Their conversation was interrupted by the ringing of Olivia's phone, a sound that had become increasingly rare as she disconnected from her old life. She glanced at the screen and froze. It was her mother. Sorry, she murmured to Ethan. I should take this. She stepped inside, closing the balcony door behind her before answering. Hello, Mother. Olivia, thank goodness. I've been trying to reach you for days. Her mother's voice was tense, controlled in that way that meant she was truly upset. There's been a development. You need to come home immediately. I am home, Olivia said, the words surprising her even as she spoke them. This small apartment above a hardware store in a town she'd barely known 3 months ago had become more of a home than anywhere she'd lived before. Don't be ridiculous, her mother snapped. This isn't about your little vacation, it's serious. The trustees have frozen your accounts. All of them. Olivia sat down heavily on the couch. What, why? Your father and I may have influenced their decision, her mother said, her voice cooling further. It's for your own good, Olivia. This has gone on long enough. You've made your point, whatever it was. Richard has approached us about reconciliation. Reconciliation? Olivia echoed, disbelieving. He left me for my best friend. At our engagement party. Megan is out of the picture, her mother said dismissively. She apparently found someone wealthier shortly after you left. Richard recognizes his mistake. The merger possibility is still on the table. Your father has had a minor heart scare, and the doctor says stress is a major factor. He needs this deal to go through, Olivia. He needs you to come home and fix this. The familiar weight of familial obligation pressed down on Olivia, the same weight she'd carried her entire life. For a moment, she felt herself bending under it, the old patterns reasserting themselves. I'll transfer enough money for a plane ticket, her mother continued, clearly sensing victory. Pack whatever you need from wherever you are. Leave the rest. We'll get you proper clothes once you're back. Olivia looked around the apartment, at the mismatched furniture chosen for comfort rather than style, at the bookshelves filled with stories she'd come to love, at the small kitchen where she'd learned to cook real meals. She thought of the friends she'd made in Harbor Cove, of her job at the bookstore where she helped people find stories that mattered to them, of the simple pleasures she'd discovered in a life without pretense. And she thought of Ethan waiting patiently on the balcony, a man who had walked away from what everyone told him he should want because it didn't make him happy. No, she said quietly. Excuse me? Her mother's voice sharpened. I said no. I'm not coming back. Not for Richard, not for the merger, not even for Father. Olivia took a deep breath. I'm building something here, Mother. Something real. Something that makes me happy. Don't be absurd. You're working in a bookstore and living in some seaside shack. That's not a life for a Bennett. Maybe I don't want to be a Bennett anymore, Olivia said, surprising herself with the thought. At least not the kind of Bennett you expect me to be. Her mother's voice turned cold. If you don't come home immediately, you can forget about accessing your trust fund. Your grandmother's money will remain frozen until you come to your senses. Olivia hadn't even thought about her grandmother's trust fund in months. It was substantial, left directly to her when she turned 25, though she'd never needed to touch it with her parents covering all her expenses. Do what you need to do, Olivia said, a strange calm settling over her. I'll figure something out. She ended the call before her mother could respond, then sat in silence for a long moment, processing what had just happened. For the first time in her life, she'd directly refused her parents' demands. It should have felt terrifying, but instead she felt oddly free. The balcony door slid open and Ethan stepped inside, his expression concerned. Everything okay? He asked. Olivia looked up at him, not sure where to begin. That way is my mother. My family has cut me off financially. They want me to come home to get back together with Richard. She gave a short, humorless laugh. Apparently, he's available again. Ethan sat beside her on the couch, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his solid presence. "And what do you want?" he asked simply. The question caught her off guard. In her old life, what she wanted had rarely been the primary consideration. There were always other factors: family expectations, social obligations, the appropriate next steps for someone of her position. "I want to stay here," she said finally. "I like the life I'm building. I like who I'm becoming." She hesitated, then added more quietly, "I like who I am when I'm with you." Something shifted in Ethan's expression. A softening, a moment of vulnerability that matched her own. "I like who I am when I'm with you too," he said softly. Their eyes met, and Olivia felt a pull toward him that had nothing to do with physical attraction, though that was certainly there. It was deeper, a recognition of something genuine, a connection that had grown naturally over shared meals and conversations, small kindnesses and mutual respect. Almost without thinking, she leaned forward. Ethan met her halfway, their lips meeting in a gentle kiss that felt like a question and an answer all at once. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing softly against her skin as the kiss deepened, becoming something more definite, more certain. When they pulled apart, Olivia felt slightly breathless, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the wine they'd been sharing. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," Ethan admitted, his voice husky. "Why didn't you?" Olivia asked. "You were still healing," he said simply. "I didn't want to be a rebound or a distraction." The thoughtfulness of his restraint touched her. Richard had pursued her aggressively from their first meeting, showering her with expensive gifts and grand gestures that had felt romantic at the time, but in retrospect seemed more like acquisition than courtship. "I have another problem," she said, reluctantly pulling back to reality. "I may not be able to afford my half of the rent next month. The bookstore job doesn't pay much, and now that my accounts are frozen—" "We'll figure it out," Ethan said, taking her hand. "Maybe Grace can give you more hours, or there's a cafe by the pier that's looking for help. We can make this work, Olivia, if it's what you want." The "we" in his statement warmed her more than any declaration of love could have. This wasn't Ethan riding to her rescue. It was an offer of partnership, of facing a challenge together. Before she could respond, Ethan's phone rang, an unusual occurrence at this hour. He glanced at it with a frown. "It's Wilson." "I should take this," he answered, his expression growing more serious as he listened. "I see. When did they tell you this? 2 months? Oh, I understand. Yes, I'll be there first thing tomorrow. We'll figure something out." He ended the call and sat in silence for a moment, his face grim. "What's wrong?" Olivia asked, sensing bad news. That was Old Man Wilson. "The boatyard's being sold. Some development company made an offer he couldn't refuse. They're planning to tear it down, build luxury condos with private boat slips." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Olivia had come to recognize as a sign of stress. "We've got 60 days before they shut us down. Everyone at the yard will be out of work." Olivia felt a chill. Development companies buying up waterfront property to build luxury condos was exactly the kind of project Bennett Enterprises specialized in. She wondered briefly if her family's company was behind this, then pushed the thought away. Harbor Cove was too small to attract their attention. "I'm so sorry," she said, squeezing his hand. "What will you do?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't know. There aren't many yards left that do the kind of restoration work I do. I might have to move, find work at a modern marina." He looked around the apartment, his expression pained. "I love this place." The thought of leaving, Olivia's mind raced, trying to find a solution. She thought of her grandmother's trust fund, still technically hers even if currently frozen. Then she remembered something her grandmother had told her once. "Money isn't just for buying things, dear one. Sometimes it's for buying freedom, the freedom to make choices based on what matters, not what pays." A wild idea began to form in her mind. "What if you didn't have to leave?" she asked slowly. "What if someone bought the boatyard instead of the developers?" Ethan gave a short laugh. "Nice thought, but Wilson said the offer is over $1 million. No one in town has that kind of money to invest in an old boatyard." "I might," Olivia said quietly. Ethan looked at her, confusion evident on his face. "What?" "My grandmother left me a trust fund," Olivia explained. "It's substantial, more than enough to buy the boatyard. My parents have frozen it for now, but legally it's mine. I just need to find a way to access it. Olivia, I can't let you spend your inheritance on a failing boatyard. Ethan protested. It wouldn't be failing with the right management, Olivia pointed out. And it wouldn't just be for you. It would be an investment in my future, too. In our future, maybe. The last words came out softer, more hesitant. Ethan was silent for a long moment, studying her face. You're serious about this, he said finally. I am, Olivia confirmed. But I need to figure out how to access my trust without giving in to my parents' demands. They sat in thoughtful silence, the challenge before them daunting but not insurmountable. Then Ethan spoke, his voice careful, as if testing an idea he wasn't sure of. There might be a way, he said slowly. It's unconventional. I'm listening. Your trust fund. You said you get full access at 25, right? When Olivia nodded, he continued, and you're already past that age, so legally the money is yours. The only reason you can't access it now is because your parents have leveraged their influence with the trustees. That's right. Olivia confirmed, not sure where he was going with this. What if you had a legal reason they couldn't interfere with? A change in status that would require the trustees to give you access regardless of your parents' wishes. Olivia frowned, puzzled. Like what? Ethan took a deep breath. Like marriage. If you were married, you'd have a legal right to access your own trust fund without parental approval. It's an old legal protection, but it still exists in most trust structures. Olivia stared at him, the implication of his words sinking in. Are you suggesting we get married? As a business arrangement? Ethan's eyes held hers steadily. I'm suggesting we consider it as a practical solution to both our problems. You get access to your trust, we buy the boatyard. Save the jobs of everyone who works there and build something together. He paused, then added quietly, the fact that I'm falling in love with you would just be a bonus. The simple declaration sent a jolt through Olivia. Not of shock, but of recognition. Because she had been falling too, slowly and surely, over shared meals and late-night conversations, through small kindnesses and mutual support. This is crazy, she whispered, but she was smiling. Completely, Ethan agreed, a matching smile spreading across his face. So what do you say, Olivia Bennett? Want to marry a boat restorer and buy an old boatyard? In that moment, with the weight of her family's expectations finally lifted, Olivia made the first completely free choice of her adult life. Yes, she said, leaning forward to kiss him again. Yes, I do. 3 days later, Olivia found herself in the small courthouse of Harbor Cove, wearing a simple white sundress purchased from the local boutique. No designer labels, no family heirlooms, no elaborate veil or train, just a dress she liked, with a small bouquet of wildflowers Ethan had picked that morning. The ceremony was brief and no nonsense, witnessed only by Grace from the bookstore and Wilson, the aging boatyard owner. No elaborate vows, no string quartet, no champagne fountain, just the basic legal declarations and a kiss that sealed their unexpected union. You may now kiss the bride? The justice of the peace announced, closing his book with a smile. Ethan leaned in, his eyes meeting Olivia's with a mix of tenderness and something like wonder. Their lips met in a kiss that, despite the practical reasons behind their marriage, held genuine affection and growing love. As they signed the marriage certificate, Olivia felt a strange sense of rightness. Her first engagement had been celebrated with a party for 200 people, covered in society pages, planned over months with a small army of consultants and designers. Yet this simple courthouse ceremony felt more meaningful, more honest. Congratulations, you two, Wilson said, patting Ethan on the back. Never thought I'd see this fellow settle down. You must be something special, young lady. Grace hugged Olivia warmly. I'm happy for you both, she said. Though I hope this doesn't mean you'll be quitting the bookstore. Not at all, Olivia assured her. We're staying right here in Harbor Cove. In fact, if all goes well, we may be making an even bigger commitment to the town. They celebrated with lunch at the Anchor, nothing fancy, just good food shared with their 2 witnesses and a few friends who joined them after hearing the news. The locals seemed delighted by the sudden marriage, though Olivia caught a few curious glances. No doubt some wondered about the whirlwind romance, but no one asked uncomfortable questions or suggested ulterior motives. That evening, back in their apartment, now officially their shared home, Olivia and Ethan sat at the kitchen table with a stack of legal documents. First thing tomorrow, we file these with the bank. Olivia said, reviewing the paperwork her grandmother's lawyer had emailed after a long phone conversation. The elderly attorney had been skeptical at first, but had come around when Olivia explained the situation. He'd always had a soft spot for her grandmother's rebellious streak and seemed pleased to help her granddaughter assert her independence. Once they verify the marriage certificate, they'll have to release the trust fund to your control, he'd explained. Your parents may fight it, but legally they have no standing. The trust was explicit that the money became yours entirely at 25. And you're sure you want to do this? Ethan asked, now his expression serious. Using your inheritance to buy an old boatyard in a small town, it's a big step away from the life you were raised for. I'm sure, Olivia said, reaching for his hand across the table. The money was from my grandmother. She always told me to use it for something that would make me truly happy, not just something that would maintain the family image. She smiled. Somehow I think she'd approve of this plan. Ethan squeezed her hand, his expression softening. Then let's do this. Partners in life and business, partners, Olivia agreed, liking the sound of the word. Not a trophy wife, not an heiress fulfilling her designated role, but a partner in building something real. The next weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. As predicted, Olivia's parents fought the release of the trust fund, but the marriage certificate effectively tied their hands. The trustees, bound by the legal terms of the trust, transferred control to Olivia despite her parents' objections. With the funds secured, they approached Wilson with an offer for the boatyard, matching the developer's price but with the promise to maintain it as a working yard, keeping all current employees and expanding operations rather than tearing it down. I'd rather sell to you two any day, Wilson told them, relief evident in his weathered face. Never liked the idea of those condos. This yard has been in my family for generations. Hated to be the one to end that legacy. The purchase went through quickly, and soon Olivia found herself co-owner of Hayes Boatyard, the name now fitting in a way no one in town yet realized. She threw herself into learning the business side of operations, drawing on skills she'd acquired working at Bennett Enterprises but applying them to something she genuinely cared about. Ethan handled the restoration work and client relations, his expertise and passion for wooden boats attracting customers from up and down the coast. Together they began making improvements, updating equipment, enhancing the workspace, developing a website to showcase their restoration projects. Winter settled over Harbor Cove, bringing shorter days and cozy evenings in their apartment. Their marriage, begun as a practical arrangement, deepened into something genuine. They learned each other's habits and quirks, negotiated shared spaces and responsibilities, celebrated small successes, and worked through inevitable disagreements. Physical attraction, which had simmered between them from early in their friendship, blossomed into a passionate connection that still sometimes caught Olivia by surprise. Never with Richard had she felt so desired for herself, not for her name or her connections or what she represented, but simply for being Olivia. Yet as content as she was in their growing life together, Olivia began noticing small inconsistencies in Ethan's behavior. He occasionally received phone calls that he took in private, stepping outside or lowering his voice. Sometimes he disappeared for hours with vague explanations about checking on a supplier or meeting a potential client. At first, Olivia dismissed her concerns. Everyone was entitled to privacy even within marriage. But as the peculiarities accumulated, doubt began to creep in. Was Ethan hiding something? Had she rushed too quickly into this marriage, blinded by the urgency of their situation and her growing feelings? One snowy afternoon in late January, Olivia was working in the small office they'd set up at the boatyard. Business was slower in winter, giving them time to catch up on paperwork and planning. She was searching through a filing cabinet for some insurance documents when she came across a folder she didn't recognize. Inside were papers with unfamiliar letterhead, Harrington Maritime Industries. Curious, she began reading, then froze as she processed what she was seeing: financial reports, corporate structure documents, and most disturbingly, a passport in the name of Ethan Harrington III, with her husband's photo. Heart pounding, she continued reading, piecing together a story that made no sense. Harrington Maritime Industries was one of the largest shipping conglomerates on the East Coast, a competitor to Bennett Enterprises in certain markets, though focused more on shipping than development. According to these documents, Ethan wasn't a simple boat restorer who'd walked away from a corporate job. He was the heir to the Harrington fortune, son of the late founder, more confused than angry. Olivia spread the documents across the desk, trying to understand. Why would the heir to a shipping empire be working in a small-town boatyard under a different name? Why would he have hidden this from her, especially after they married? The office door opened and Ethan stepped in, stomping snow from his boots. He stopped abruptly when he saw the papers spread across the desk, his face draining of color. "Olivia," he said quietly, "I can explain." "I certainly hope so," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my husband isn't who he claims to be." Ethan closed the door and sank into the chair opposite the desk. For a long moment he was silent, as if gathering his thoughts. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and serious. "My real name is Ethan Harrington III. My parents founded Harrington Maritime Industries. They died in a yacht accident 5 years ago." He paused, pain flickering across his face. "At least that's what the official report said. A tragic accident during a storm." "And you don't believe it was an accident," Olivia said, seeing where this was going. Ethan shook his head. "After the funeral, I found discrepancies in the company finances. Large sums moving through shell companies, unusual transactions, decisions that made no business sense. When I started asking questions, there was pushback from the board. Then my brakes failed on a mountain road. The mechanic said it looked like they'd been tampered with." Olivia's anger began to fade, replaced by concern. "You think someone within the company was embezzling and tried to kill you when you noticed?" "I couldn't prove anything, and I didn't know who to trust," Ethan continued. "So I created a new identity. I had some money set aside in accounts not connected to the family. I disappeared, became Ethan Hayes, and started looking for evidence from the outside." "Why Harbor Cove?" Olivia asked. "The location was strategic," Ethan admitted. "Harrington ships pass near here regularly. The boatyard gave me access to maritime information, contacts with crew members, a reason to be interested in shipping without raising suspicions. I've been gathering evidence slowly, carefully." He leaned forward, his expression intense. "I never expected to meet someone like you. By the time I realized I was falling in love, I was too deep in this false identity. I didn't know how to tell you without risking everything, both the investigation and our relationship." Olivia sat back, processing this revelation. Part of her wanted to be angry at the deception, but another part recognized the impossible situation Ethan had found himself in. Hadn't she also come to Harbor Cove seeking escape, creating a new identity of sorts, leaving behind the Olivia Bennett that everyone thought they knew? "The boatyard purchase," she said slowly. "Was that part of your investigation too?" Ethan nodded reluctantly. "The development company trying to buy it has connections to people I suspect were involved in the embezzlement. I believe they wanted the property to establish a discrete transfer point for something they're smuggling. When you suggested using your trust fund to buy it instead," he trailed off, looking genuinely conflicted. "You saw an opportunity," Olivia finished for him. "Our marriage gave you a legitimate reason to acquire the property without raising suspicions." "That makes it sound calculated," Ethan protested, reaching for her hand across the desk. "Yes, it solved a problem in my investigation, but Olivia, I married you because I love you. The timing may have been accelerated by circumstances, but my feelings are real." Olivia pulled her hand away, not ready for reconciliation. "How am I supposed to believe that? How do I know what's real and what's part of your investigation?" The hurt in her voice was evident despite her attempt to stay calm. Ethan's face fell. "I know I've given you reason to doubt me, but everything between us, our conversations, our life together, the person I am with you, that's all real. Ethan Hayes may not be my legal name, but he's who I've become. The only difference is my past and some resources I haven't told you about." "Some resources?" Olivia echoed with disbelief. "Ethan, Harrington Maritime is worth billions. That's not a small detail you forgot to mention." "Money doesn't matter to me the way it once did," Ethan said, his voice low. "These past 5 years living simply, working with my hands, connecting with real people instead of sycophants and social climbers, it changed me. I discovered what actually makes me happy." He looked up at her, his eyes sincere. "And then I found you, someone who seemed to be on the same journey." Olivia stood up, needing space to think. The parallel wasn't lost on her. Both of them hiding aspects of their identities, both seeking something authentic away from wealth and privilege. But while she had been open about her past, he had constructed an elaborate deception. "I need time to process this," she said finally. It's a lot to take in. Ethan nodded, resignation in his expression. I understand. For what it's worth, I was planning to tell you everything once I had enough evidence to go to the authorities. I'm close, Olivia. A few more weeks and I'll have what I need to prove what happened to my parents and who's been stealing from the company. He stood and moved toward the door, then paused. Whatever you decide about us, please be careful. If anyone discovers you know about me, you could be in danger. The people involved in this won't hesitate to protect themselves. With that warning, he left, closing the door softly behind him. Alone in the office, Olivia looked again at the documents spread before her. The man she'd married was not who she thought he was. Not a simple boat restorer who'd walked away from corporate life, but the heir to a shipping empire living undercover to investigate corporate crime. The question wasn't whether Ethan had lied to her. He clearly had, by omission if not direct deception. The question was whether those lies invalidated everything else they'd shared. The way he'd listened to her troubles without judgment. The patience he'd shown teaching her to cook. The genuine pleasure he took in simple moments. The tenderness between them that had grown so naturally. Could a man who was fundamentally dishonest create the kind of connection they'd shared? Or was that connection itself evidence that beneath the false name, Ethan's essential character was genuine? As the snow continued to fall outside, coating Harbor Cove in white, Olivia faced the most difficult decision yet in her new life. Whether to trust the man she loved despite discovering he'd hidden his true identity, or to walk away from what might be another elaborate deception. She gathered the documents, returning them to their folder, and left the office. She needed space to think, to sort through her complicated feelings, to decide what she truly believed about the man she'd married. Because one thing was certain, nothing about their shared life would be the same after today's discovery. That evening, Olivia didn't return to their apartment. She needed space. Time to process the shocking revelation about her husband's identity. Instead, she checked into the small inn where she'd stayed when she first arrived in Harbor Cove, feeling a strange sense of coming full circle. Lying on the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, she tried to sort through her tangled emotions. Anger at Ethan's deception warred with understanding of his impossible situation. Fear about what this meant for their future competed with a stubborn hope that what they'd built together wasn't founded entirely on lies. She barely slept, her mind replaying moments from their relationship, examining them for authenticity. The way Ethan looked at her when she mastered a new recipe, his genuine interest when she talked about books she was reading, the comfortable silences they shared on their balcony, the passionate nights and lazy mornings. Had it all been calculated? A masterful performance by a man with secrets? No, she decided as dawn broke. Whatever his name, the connection between them had been real. She'd seen too much evidence of his character in small, private moments that couldn't have been faked. His kindness to elderly customers at the yard. His patience with local kids curious about boats. His quiet generosity to friends in need. Still, the magnitude of his deception troubled her. Not just the false name, but the hidden wealth, the dangerous investigation, the calculated acquisition of the boatyard. If they were to have any future, there could be no more secrets between them. Olivia spent the morning walking along the winter beach, bundled against the cold, watching waves crash against the shore. By afternoon, she'd reached a decision. She would hear Ethan out, give him a chance to explain everything, hold nothing back. Then she would decide whether their marriage had a future. She was about to return to the inn when her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Hesitating only briefly, she answered. Olivia Bennett? The voice was formal, unfamiliar. This is Detective Collins with the Harbor Cove Police Department. There's been an incident at Hayes Boatyard. We need you to come down right away. Her heart lurched. Is Ethan okay? What happened? Ma'am, it's better if we discuss this in person. How quickly can you get to the boatyard? Olivia was already running toward town. 10 minutes, she gasped, ending the call. The scene at the boatyard stopped her cold. Police cars with flashing lights, yellow caution tape, officers talking in low voices, and worst of all, an ambulance parked with its back doors open. Detective Collins, a middle-aged woman with a stern face, met her at the tape. Mrs. Hayes, I'm sorry to inform you that there was a break-in at the boatyard office. Your husband interrupted the intruders and was assaulted. Is he? Olivia couldn't finish the sentence, fear choking the words. He's alive, the detective assured her quickly. Concussion, some broken ribs, various contusions. They're taking him to County General. You can ride with him if you'd like. Relief made Olivia's knees weak. What happened? Who did this? We're investigating, Collins said, her expression carefully neutral. The office was ransacked. Any idea what they might have been looking for? Olivia thought of the folder of documents she'd discovered yesterday. Evidence of corporate crime. Proof of who had killed Ethan's parents. I'm not sure, she said, unwilling to share Ethan's secrets with the police before talking to him. We keep the business records there, client information, that sort of thing. The detective nodded, clearly not entirely convinced. We'll need a detailed statement, but that can wait until after you've seen your husband. Olivia was escorted to the ambulance, where paramedics were preparing to transport Ethan. He looked terrible, face bruised, a bandage around his head, eyes closed as he lay strapped to the gurney. Ethan, she whispered, taking his hand. His eyes fluttered open, focusing on her with effort. Olivia, he murmured, voice weak. The documents. They took them, all of it. 5 years of evidence. Gone. Don't worry about that now, she soothed, her earlier anger forgotten in the face of his injuries. Just rest. We'll figure it out. His fingers tightened on hers. Not safe, he managed. They know who I am now. Who you are. You need to be careful. They'll come after you too. A paramedic interrupted gently. We need to go, ma'am. You can ride with us or follow to the hospital. I'll come with you, Olivia said immediately, not willing to let Ethan out of her sight. The ride to County General passed in a blur. Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness while paramedics monitored his condition. At the hospital, he was whisked away for scans and treatment, leaving Olivia alone in a sterile waiting room with her churning thoughts. The attack confirmed everything Ethan had told her. There really were dangerous people after him, willing to resort to violence to protect their secrets. Her anger at his deception faded further, replaced by concern and a growing determination. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Hours later, she was allowed to see him. Ethan lay in a hospital bed looking pale against the white sheets. His face was a map of bruises, one eye swollen nearly shut. But he was awake and alert. You stayed, he said softly as she entered the room. Olivia moved to his bedside, taking his hand carefully to avoid the IV line. Of course I stayed. I thought after yesterday, after finding out who I really am. He trailed off, wincing as he shifted position. We have a lot to talk about, Olivia acknowledged. But right now I'm just glad you're alive. She hesitated, then asked, What exactly happened at the yard? Ethan closed his eyes briefly. 3 men, professional. They were searching the office when I arrived. I tried to stop them, but he gestured to his battered body with his free hand. They knew exactly what they were looking for. Took all the documents, the backup drives, everything. Years of careful work, gone in minutes. Do you know who sent them? Has to be someone high up at Harrington. The documents pointed to board members working with a rival company, Coastal Shipping. There's more than embezzlement going on. They've been using company ships to smuggle something. I was getting close to proving it. Frustration sharpened his voice. Now I have nothing. Just my word against theirs. And with my history of disappearing, creating a false identity, who would believe me? Olivia squeezed his hand. I believe you. Ethan's expression softened. Thank you. But it doesn't change the fact that we're both in danger now. They know who I am and they know about you. We need to leave Harbor Cove. And go where? I have a safe house. Remote location, good security. We can figure out next steps from there. Olivia considered this, turning over possibilities in her mind. Then a thought struck her. Maybe we don't have to run. Maybe we can fight back, Ethan frowned. How? I told you, they took all my evidence. But they don't know what I might have, Olivia said slowly. An idea forming. My father complains constantly about Coastal Shipping. They've underbid Bennett Enterprises on several major contracts recently. Suspiciously low bids that shouldn't have been profitable. That fits, Ethan said, interest sharpening his gaze despite his injuries. They could offer below-market rates if they're supplementing their income with smuggling. Bennett Enterprises has a research department that investigates competitors. My father is paranoid about industrial espionage. If Coastal has been acting suspiciously, my father will have a file on them. Olivia paused, the implications of what she was suggesting sinking in. But I'd have to go back to the city. Face my family. Too dangerous, Ethan protested. If these people realize what you're doing, they won't, Olivia said with more confidence than she felt. As far as anyone knows, I'm just a prodigal daughter returning home after my impulsive rebellion. No one would connect me to your investigation. Ethan studied her face. You'd do that? Go back to the life you ran away from. Not permanently, Olivia clarified. Just long enough to get what we need. She smiled slightly. Besides, it might be satisfying to face them on my own terms. I left in shame and humiliation. This time would be different. Before Ethan could respond, there was a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices, hurried footsteps. The door to Ethan's room burst open and a security guard appeared. Mrs. Hayes, he said urgently, there are people here demanding to see you and your husband. They claim to be family, but they're quite insistent. Hospital policy is not to allow visitors who might upset patients. Olivia and Ethan exchanged alarmed looks. Had Harrington's people found them already? Who are they? Olivia asked, tensing. They say they're your parents, the guard replied. And there's another gentleman with them who claims to be your former fiancé. They're making quite a scene in the lobby. Relief and dread warred within Olivia. Not Harrington's thugs, then, just her actual family. But how had they found her so quickly? And why was Richard with them? I should talk to them, she said to Ethan. Find out how they found us and what they want. Ethan nodded reluctantly. Be careful. We don't know if they're connected to this somehow. Olivia made her way to the hospital lobby, bracing herself. Sure enough, her parents stood there looking utterly out of place in their designer clothes and imperious expressions, and beside them, immaculate as ever, stood Richard. Olivia, her mother exclaimed, rushing forward. Thank goodness. When we got the call about the attack, how did you know about that? Olivia interrupted, instantly suspicious. Her father stepped forward. Small-town news travels fast when it involves property owned by Bennett Enterprises. The boatyard isn't owned by Bennett Enterprises, Olivia corrected. It's owned by me and my husband. Yes, this mysterious husband we've just learned about, her mother said disapprovingly. Really, Olivia, a secret marriage? After everything we've been through? And now he's been attacked by burglars? What kind of life have you created for yourself? Olivia ignored her mother's questions, focusing on her father's earlier statement. You still haven't explained how you knew about the attack or why you're here. Her father and Richard exchanged glances, and Richard stepped forward. Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private, he suggested. With the smooth charm that had once seemed so appealing and now struck Olivia as artificial. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here, Olivia replied firmly. Richard sighed dramatically. Very well. We received intelligence that Ethan Harrington had resurfaced in Harbor Cove, apparently living under an assumed name. Given our history with Harrington Maritime, your father asked me to investigate. Your history? Olivia echoed, a chill running through her. Whitmore Industries has been negotiating a potential acquisition of certain Harrington Maritime assets, Richard explained. Assets that have been significantly undervalued since the unfortunate deaths of the elder Harringtons and the disappearance of their son. The pieces suddenly clicked together in Olivia's mind. You're working with Coastal Shipping, she said, the revelation stunning her. The same people who killed Ethan's parents and tried to kill him. Richard's expression hardened. Those are serious and unfounded accusations, Olivia. The Harringtons died in a tragic accident. As for their son, he abandoned his responsibilities, leaving the company vulnerable. We're simply ensuring those assets don't go to waste. By stealing them, Olivia said flatly. And when Ethan started gathering evidence against you, you sent men to beat him and destroy the proof. Her father stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. That's enough, Olivia. You have no idea what you're talking about. We came here out of concern when we heard about the attack. Richard has generously offered to take you back despite your indiscretion with this Harrington fellow. It's time to end this foolishness and come home. Olivia stared at her father, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. The man she had spent her life trying to please, whose approval she had sought in every decision, now stood before her as a stranger, someone willing to partner with criminals for financial gain, someone who saw her not as a daughter but as a business asset. I am home, she said quietly. My home is with Ethan, wherever that might be. Don't be absurd, her mother snapped. The man lied to you about his very identity. He's been living some bizarre double life, hiding from his responsibilities, and now he's dragged you into danger. This isn't a fairy tale, Olivia. It's time to grow up. Before Olivia could respond, Detective Collins appeared beside her. Is everything all right here, Mrs. Hayes? She asked, her gaze sweeping assessingly over Olivia's family. Yes, Detective. My family was just leaving, Olivia said firmly. Actually, Collins said, I'd like to speak with all of you. She turned to Richard. Mr. Whitmore, I presume, and Mr. and Mrs. Bennett. I have some questions about your business relationships with Coastal Shipping and the recent attack on Mr. Hayes. Richard's smooth facade cracked slightly. I'm not sure what you're implying, Detective, but I assure you we had nothing to do with any attack. Interesting, Collins replied. Because we found a burner phone at the scene with only one number in its call log. A number belonging to Whitmore Industries' private security division. She turned to Olivia. Your husband regained consciousness enough to give us a statement. He had a recording device in his office. A precaution, he said. The men who attacked him were quite explicit about who sent them. Olivia felt a surge of hope. He had a backup you didn't know about, she said to Richard, unable to keep the satisfaction from her voice. Richard's face drained of color. Her father began blustering about lawyers and harassment, while her mother simply